Tulsi Gabbard's campaign today put out a press release calling on the DNC to exhibit more transparency in how they determine which candidates are permitted entry into the forthcoming debates. By the way, yes, I'm wearing a suit. Congratulations on observing that. More importantly, the press release is fairly explicit in its criticism of the DNC. It accuses, quote, party bosses of making secret decisions about debate qualification criteria that aren't shared with the public. The details are being shrouded. As I've mentioned numerous times here and elsewhere, the most obvious argument as to the totally arbitrary nature of the DNC's decision-making process is that if they simply permitted polls conducted by the largest newspapers in two early primary states, New Hampshire and South Carolina, Tulsi would be qualified. Again, she got 3%, actually over 3% in a Boston Globe poll and 2% in a South Carolina Post and Courier poll. That alone, those two polls, forget every other variable, forget any other consideration. If they simply allowed those two polls, she'd be in because she has two qualifying polls as of now. One from CBS and one from CNN. Now, if you're wondering why CBS and CNN have been magically exalted as, quote, approved sponsors, and the Boston Globe and the Post and Courier have not, you're in good company because I'm still puzzling over that one as well. But this statement from Tulsi's campaign, and not from her directly really, because she's a tad incognito right now in Indonesia on the latter part of her National Guard training mission, they're pretty explicit in calling out the spurious grounds on which the DNC is somewhat likely now to deny Tulsi admittance into the next debate. And we've gone over why this is mind-bogglingly arbitrary for a host of reasons in the past, but ponder this, okay? There are some polls for which the sample size is a couple hundred people, 300, 400. That means the DNC is deciding a monumental development for the trajectory of these campaigns on the basis of polling data that literally amount to rounding errors. If you get 1.4% in a poll with 500 people, 400, etc., you don't qualify because it doesn't round up to 2. But if you get 1.6%, congratulations, because that rounds up to 2. Now, do we really want, or should it be seen as valid for these trivial fractional differences to have such an outsized role in determining who the American voter is permitted to hear from on a national stage, which is, for better or worse, when most people tune in, or when an extraordinary or unusual amount of people tune into the political process, the idea that those fractional difference would be the key determining factor is just absurd. And Tulsi pointed that out in a press release, or at least her campaign pointed it out sort of by proxy on her behalf. And actually in that press release, my article at Real Clear Politics from earlier this week is cited. So apparently I was onto something. No, I'm just kidding. Now, this also gets to the bigger issue of whether it makes any sense for debates as a whole to be playing such a dominating role in this election process. So much of the coverage of the 2020 cycle has focused on who makes the debate, who hasn't, who's in, who's out, who's got the donors, who's got the polls. And then on top of that, breathless coverage of the melodrama that unfolds at the debates themselves. And then the polling results that come in reaction to the debates. it seems like this accounts for, 75% of the total presidential election in the Democratic Party's media coverage. And the campaigns themselves are making major decisions about strategy solely on the basis of these debates. We've had 2 dropouts this week. Seth Moulton today, who you might have never heard of, but he was in fact running. He's a sitting congressman from Massachusetts. I actually interviewed him, 2 months ago, and he just didn't say anything interesting enough for me to do anything with. So, nobody particularly cared. And Jay Inslee dropped out this week, which was a little odd because he happened to surpass the 130,000 donor threshold on Monday, and then by Wednesday he was gone. So, I don't know. It seemed a tad sketchy to me. Either way, they're clearly dropping out because of a lack of potential for them to be in the next debate. And should that really be what's guiding these decisions? These debates, which after all are orchestrated by the party bosses, as Tulsi's campaign put it, in accordance with the corporate TV networks, who obviously have an incentive to not drive serious, sustained debate, but rather, reality TV theatrics in the interest of generating ratings and advertising revenue. I don't know. The whole system seems a little bit skewed to me. But even accepting the system as it currently is, the idea that Tulsi should be excluded, even though she has many, many polls that ostensibly should put her past the required threshold, including from the 2 largest newspapers in the 2 crucial primary states, and excluding her on those grounds is just beyond ridiculous. And, so more and more people have read that Real Clear Politics piece, which I'm gratified by, and then others have been commenting on it and putting their own spin on it. So I find it a little bit odd that nobody had really been covering it prior to my sorry ass writing up a little article for Real Clear Politics, which, is a known website in political junkie circles, but not so much in the public writ large. But, if that's what it took, okay, but I'm a little curious why so few others in the media, to the extent that I'm in the media, I do write for major media, I'm a little bit confused as to why they're not all that interested in covering this subject, especially given that at the moment Tulsi is doing something rather historic. I don't know of an example in history where a candidate has actually left the campaign trail, the presidential campaign trail that is, to take part in active duty military service. I think that's rather unique, and if you know of a prior example of that, anytime in history, let me know, because I've looked into it a bit, and I happen to be an insufferable nerd on this subject of, presidential election history, and I don't know of any prior examples. So you think that alone would cause some in the media, well, I don't know, New York Times, CBS, whatever, to take up the issue of why Tulsi is being excluded on frivolous grounds, but, they're not interested. They're hanging on every Trump tweet as usual and, screaming about trivialities. Okay, so that'll do it. Talk to you later.